What if a grieving father uncovered a secret no one was meant to know? A truth so disturbing it would change his life forever. Stay until the end to find out what really happened. Before we start, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to know. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss powerful stories like this. The sun shone brightly over the quiet suburban neighborhood where Daniel Harris lived with his 10-year-old daughter, Maya. It was one of those ordinary days that no one expected would end in tragedy. The street was lined with modest houses, well-kept lawns, and white picket fences. Smiles were exchanged out of habit, not friendship. To Daniel, it was a place where people nodded politely, but never cared to look deeper. All that mattered to him was the little girl who made this quiet corner of the world his home. Maya was his everything. Since the day her mother left them years ago, Daniel poured every ounce of love and attention into raising his daughter. She was his pride, his light, and his reason for pushing through each day, no matter how tired or broken he felt inside. That morning had been no different. The smell of eggs and sausage filled the kitchen as Maya sat at the table, her colored pencils scattered around her sketch pad. She was drawing, just like she always did, capturing a moment from their life. This time, it was a picture of the two of them, standing hand in hand under a large tree. Her small fingers gripped the pencil as she shaded in the leaves, tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Daniel watched her from the stove, his heart swelling with pride. "Make sure you get my muscles right," Daniel teased, flexing his arm dramatically as he placed a plate of eggs and sausage in front of her. Maya giggled, her eyes lighting up as she held up the half-finished picture. "You're the strongest dad in the world," she declared, grinning from ear to ear. Daniel chuckled and leaned down to press a kiss to the top of her head. "Don't you forget it, okay?" he whispered. That was the last time he heard her laugh. Later that afternoon, the playground was full of children running, laughing, and chasing each other around. Maya had begged to go out and play. Daniel, needing to finish some paperwork from the auto repair shop where he worked, had reluctantly agreed. She promised she wouldn't be long, and he watched her skip down the sidewalk, her backpack bouncing with every step. Daniel tried to focus on his work, but something gnawed at him. Every few minutes, his eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. The house was too quiet without her. He told himself he was just being overprotective, but the feeling didn't go away. When the phone rang, his heart sank before he even answered. Some part of him already knew. The voice on the other end was calm, rehearsed, too practiced. "Mr. Harris, this is Officer Reynolds. We need you to come to Memorial Hospital immediately. It's about your daughter." Daniel couldn't remember the drive. Everything blurred as he sped through intersections, his hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. By the time he reached the hospital, his legs barely carried him through the sterile halls that smelled of antiseptic and despair. The waiting room felt cold, the air too thin. When the doctor finally emerged, her face gave everything away before she spoke. "We did everything we could," she began softly. "I'm so sorry. Maya didn't make it." The words cut deeper than any blade. Daniel stared at her, his mind rejecting the reality. He felt his knees buckle as the world collapsed around him. The doctor kept talking. Something about a fall, a tragic accident, but Daniel heard none of it. He was drowning in a sea of grief. The official report came quickly, too quickly. They said Maya had climbed the jungle gym at the park, slipped and fell. A fatal blow to the head. A freak accident. That's what they called it. No one blamed anyone. No one cared enough to ask questions. Arrangements for the funeral began before Daniel could even process what was happening. Friends and neighbors came by, offering empty words of condolence that felt hollow. He nodded, thanked them, but inside he was numb. His little girl, his Maya, was gone. The funeral was scheduled within days. Daniel barely remembered picking out the coffin, a small white box with a gold trim that looked far too perfect, too clean for something that would hold his daughter's body. The cemetery was filled with rows of gray headstones, each a marker of someone else's grief. But none of it felt real. Not until Daniel stood there, staring down at the coffin that held everything he had ever loved. Maya lay inside, her face pale but peaceful, as though she were merely sleeping. Yet something gnawed at him, something he couldn't name. He brushed a hand over her cheek, expecting warmth but feeling only the cold stillness of death. The sight of her tiny hands resting on her chest sent a wave of nausea through him. Then he saw it. Bruises. Faint but visible on her arms and legs, marks that had never been mentioned in the autopsy report. His throat tightened as he remembered the words of the paramedics, how they had avoided his eyes, how their answers had felt rehearsed. For a moment, Daniel thought grief was playing tricks on his mind. He shook his head, told himself it didn't matter now. But he couldn't stop staring. And then another detail caught his eye. Dirt. There was dirt beneath Maya's fingernails, tiny specks, but enough to notice. Panic rose in his chest. "Sarah," he whispered, turning to his younger sister, who had flown in from Atlanta for the funeral. "She didn't have this before." Sarah glanced nervously at the funeral workers, then back at Daniel. "You're exhausted," she whispered. "Please, you've been through too much. Let her go, Daniel." But he couldn't. The night after the funeral, Daniel lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Every detail of the day haunted him. The bruises, the dirt, the forced smiles of the funeral home staff, and the casual way they had handled his daughter's body. He remembered overhearing two of them laughing in the hallway, saying something he couldn't quite catch. But the tone stayed with him. Disrespectful, careless. Sleep never came. By dawn, Daniel knew he couldn't let it go. Something was wrong. He didn't care if everyone called him crazy. He would find the truth. Without waiting, he drove to the electronics store. The clerk barely glanced at him as he bought a hidden camera, one designed to be small and silent. The kind of camera no one would ever notice. As he paid, Daniel wondered what kind of man he had become, one who would do something like this. But the need for answers outweighed the shame. Back home, Daniel stared at Maya's coffin. The burial was scheduled for the following day. Time was running out. Carefully, he dismantled part of the lining, hands trembling as he tucked the camera inside. It faced the interior, toward Maya. He hated himself for it. It felt like a violation, but he had to know. When Sarah came by later, Daniel told her what he had done. She stared at him in disbelief. "You put a camera in her coffin?" she whispered, horrified. "I had to," Daniel said, his voice breaking. What if something happened? What if nobody cared because it was us? Because we're black? What if they just wrote her off?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "And what if you're wrong? What then?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Then I'll live with it. But at least I'll know I didn't give up on her." That night, Daniel sat in front of his computer, watching the live feed from the camera. The screen showed nothing but darkness, the closed interior of the coffin. Hours passed. He knew he was spiraling, sinking into paranoia, but he couldn't stop. He had to be sure. As the clock struck midnight, something flickered across the screen. Daniel's heart slammed in his chest. He leaned in, breath caught in his throat. There it was again, a faint shadow, a whisper of movement. Then came a sound, barely audible but distinct. Scraping, like wood dragging against wood. Daniel froze. His hands trembled as he reached for the mouse, rewinding the footage. He played it again, this time leaning so close his breath fogged the screen. The scraping sound returned, faint, deliberate, and Daniel knew, with bone-deep certainty, that this was only the beginning. Daniel couldn't sleep after what he saw. The scraping sound from the coffin echoed in his mind long after he closed his laptop. He sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, his hands shaking. Every rational thought told him it was a glitch. Cheap camera equipment, bad lighting, maybe even interference from the electronics. But deep down, he knew better. What he heard wasn't random. It was deliberate. Morning light crept through the blinds, but Daniel barely noticed. He kept replaying the footage in his mind, frame by frame, sound by sound. He thought about waking Sarah, but what could he say? That something was inside Maya's coffin? That shadows moved and sounds came from a place where there should be only silence? She would think he had finally lost his mind. By the time Sarah came into the kitchen, Daniel was still sitting there, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale. She froze when she saw him. "Daniel, what's wrong?" she asked carefully. He turned toward her, his voice hoarse. "It happened. Something moved, and I heard it, Sarah. Scraping, like something was shifting inside." Her face fell. "Daniel, please, you're grieving. It's grief. It messes with your head." "I'm not crazy," he snapped, then immediately softened. "I know what I heard." Sarah sat down slowly. "What are you going to do now?" Daniel didn't answer right away. He grabbed his laptop, opened the footage, and scrolled back to the exact moment. "Watch," he whispered. Sarah stared at the dark screen. For a while there was nothing. Then the faint movement reappeared, a shift of shadow in the corner. A second later, the scraping sound returned. Sarah flinched. "Could be a glitch," she said weakly, but her voice lacked conviction. "Keep watching," Daniel urged. They sat in silence as the video continued. Another flicker, another scrape. Finally, Sarah looked at him, fear in her eyes. What if it's just the coffin settling? Wood creaking? That happens, right?" Daniel shook his head. "No, it's not random. It's timed. It's like someone's in there." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Daniel, I need answers," he said firmly, "and I'm not going to stop until I get them." The funeral home workers arrived later that morning to transport the coffin for burial. Daniel's stomach twisted as he watched them handle it. Their faces were blank, their movements too quick. No care, no respect, just another job to finish. One of the men, a tall, thin guy with sunken eyes, caught Daniel staring. For a split second, something flickered across his face, a smirk. Then he looked away. Daniel's fists clenched. He didn't trust them. As the workers loaded the coffin into the hearse, Daniel whispered to Sarah, "I'm going down there later, after the burial." She stared at him in shock. "Are you insane? You're talking about going back to the cemetery after dark?" "I have to," Daniel said. "If I don't, no one else will." The burial was a blur. Daniel stood there, his heart breaking all over again as the earth swallowed his daughter. He barely heard the words the priest spoke. He just watched the coffin disappear, knowing the camera was still inside, still recording. That night, Daniel sat in front of the computer again. The screen showed only blackness now, deep, suffocating dark. Still, he watched. Hours passed. Then it happened. Movement. A shadow flickered across the screen. Then another. The scraping sound returned, louder this time. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears as he cranked up the volume. What he heard next made his blood run cold. Voices, faint but unmistakable. "Quick! They'll never know." Daniel froze. Another voice replied, low and steady. "Just finish it." His hands trembled as he paused the video. He sat back, staring at the screen, his mind racing. Voices. There were voices inside his daughter's coffin. No, above it, around it. He couldn't tell, but they were there. He played it again. The same words, cold, calculated. Daniel jumped to his feet and started pacing the room. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. "What did they do?" He called Sarah. She came running, still half asleep. "Daniel, what is it?" "Listen." He pressed play again. Sarah leaned in, her face pale as she heard the whispers. Her hands covered her mouth, and she shook her head. "Oh my God, Daniel, this is real." Daniel grabbed a flash drive and copied the file, then another and another. He uploaded the footage to the cloud, emailed it to himself, and backed it up twice. He wasn't going to lose it. Not now. "I need to go back," Daniel said. "I need to talk to them." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Who? The funeral home? You think they'll tell you anything?" "I don't care," he snapped. "I need to look that bastard in the eye and make him answer for this." The next morning, Daniel walked into the funeral home. The air smelled of flowers and chemicals. The director, a pale, heavy-set man named Richard Brooks, greeted him with a rehearsed smile. "Mr. Harris, I'm so sorry for your loss. What can I do for you?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "There were bruises on my daughter's body, dirt under her nails. No one explained that." Brooks's smile never faltered. "Bodies go through changes during preparation, sir. Bruising, discoloration, it's all very normal." "Is it normal to find dirt under her fingernails?" Daniel hissed. Brooks leaned back. "Sometimes residue can remain. Children play outside. Dirt can linger. It's unfortunate but not unusual." Daniel slammed his hand on the desk. "Don't lie to me." Brooks's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Harris, I understand your grief is making this difficult, but I assure you, there's nothing unusual here." Daniel stared at him, his breathing heavy. "I'm going to find out what really happened, and when I do, you'll regret ever crossing me." Without another word, Daniel stormed out, his rage barely contained. Sarah was waiting for him in the car. "How did it go?" "They're hiding something," Daniel muttered. "I saw it in his face." They drove home in silence. Daniel couldn't stop shaking. The voices haunted him, the images replayed in his mind. That night, Daniel did the unthinkable. He called the police. It took him 3 tries to get the words out. "My name is Daniel Harris. I think my daughter's body was tampered with after death." There was silence on the other end. Finally, the officer sighed. "Mr. Harris, I'm very sorry for your loss, but what you're describing, It's not something we handle unless there's clear evidence of a crime." "I have evidence," Daniel snapped. "Video, audio, voices. I can prove it." There was another pause. "Bring it in. We'll take a look." Daniel hung up, his heart pounding. He didn't know what he expected, but at least it was a start. Sarah watched him carefully. "Are you sure about this?" "No," Daniel whispered, "but it's all I have." The next morning, Daniel walked into the police station, flash drive in hand. The officer took it with a skeptical look. "We'll review it and get back to you." Daniel nodded, but deep down he already knew. They weren't going to help him. No one was. He walked out into the cold morning air, staring at the sky. He had only one thought. If they wouldn't help him, he'd find someone who would. Daniel felt the cold settle deep in his bones as he walked away from the police station. The officer's dismissive tone replayed in his head, every word dripping with condescension. He knew the moment he handed over that flash drive it would be buried, forgotten, written off as the paranoia of a grieving father. They didn't believe him. They wouldn't help. He could see it in their eyes. The system wasn't built for men like him. That night, Daniel sat in the living room staring at his laptop, the screen dark. Sarah hovered nearby, pacing nervously. "So what now?" she asked finally, breaking the suffocating silence. Daniel didn't answer right away. His mind was racing, grasping at anything, anyone who might listen. "We go public," he said quietly. "The police don't care. The funeral home's covering it up. We need someone who can't ignore it." Sarah frowned. "Daniel, going to the media, that's dangerous. They'll twist it. They'll make you out to be crazy." "I don't care," Daniel snapped. "Let them. I'm not letting them get away with this." Sarah sighed, rubbing her temples. "Do you even know a reporter? Who would take this story?" Daniel shook his head. "I'll find one." He spent the next several hours online, searching local news outlets, reading through articles, scanning for any journalist who covered injustice or corruption. Most were dead ends, reporters who'd moved on or didn't leave contact information. Just as frustration was about to break him, he stumbled across a name. Emily Torres. Young, persistent, known for digging into stories no one else would touch. Without hesitation, Daniel composed a message, attaching one of the video files. His fingers trembled as he hit send. Then he waited. The night crept by. Sarah tried to convince him to rest, but Daniel couldn't close his eyes. Every time he tried, Maya's face appeared. Her smile, her laughter, her little hands covered in dirt she should have never touched. Morning light broke when Daniel's phone buzzed. He lunged for it. Unknown number. "Hello?" he answered, voice raw. "Mr. Harris?" A woman's voice, steady, professional. "This is Emily Torres. I got your email, and I watched the footage." Daniel's heart raced. "And?" There was a pause. "There's definitely something strange here," Emily said carefully. "The audio, the voices, it's not clear, but it's there. This isn't a story I can ignore." Daniel almost collapsed with relief. "But," Emily continued, "if we're going to pursue this, I need more. Video alone won't be enough. We need motive, history, something concrete." "I'll get you whatever you need," Daniel said quickly. "Tell me what to do." "Meet me," Emily said, "tomorrow. Bring everything you have." They agreed on a small diner at the edge of town. When Daniel arrived the next day, Sarah was by his side, unwilling to let him face this alone. Emily sat in the corner booth, notepad already out, her sharp eyes watching every move. "You came," she said, simply as they sat. Daniel wasted no time. He laid out the flash drives, printed photos, copies of Maya's autopsy report, everything. Emily listened carefully, nodding occasionally but saying little. When Daniel finished, she leaned back. "This funeral home," she began, tapping her pen. "Ever hear anything about them before? Any complaints?" Daniel shook his head. "No, but that doesn't mean there aren't any." Emily nodded. "I'll start there. If there is a pattern, I'll find it." For the next few days, Daniel and Sarah heard nothing. Emily disappeared into her work, digging through records, old articles, court filings. Every hour felt like an eternity. Daniel replayed the video over and over, the voices haunting him. Finally, Emily called. "Daniel, I found something." He met her at the same diner. Emily's face was pale, her hands gripping a thick folder. "This funeral home," she began. "They've been accused before, twice, mishandling bodies, switching caskets, falsifying records. Both times, the families were black. Both times, the cases went nowhere." Daniel felt his stomach twist. "They've been doing this for years." Emily nodded. "And there's more. The owner, Richard Brooks, has ties to several local hospitals, referrals, money changing hands." Sarah's eyes widened. "They're making money off this?" Emily's jaw tightened. "A lot of it." Daniel's fists clenched. "We need someone inside. Someone who's seen it." Emily hesitated, then pulled out a scrap of paper. "I found a guy, Trevor Mills, used to work there, left under suspicious circumstances. He might talk." Daniel didn't wait. That night, he called the number Emily gave him. The voice on the other end was nervous, shaky. "I don't know what you want," Trevor said. "The truth," Daniel replied, "about what they did to my daughter." There was a long pause, then Trevor sighed. "Meet me tonight." They met at a rundown diner on the outskirts of town. Trevor was in his 40s, eyes darting around like he expected someone to jump him. He sipped his coffee, hands trembling. "I shouldn't be here," Trevor muttered. "Then why are you?" Daniel pushed. Trevor looked up, his eyes haunted. "Because I know what they did, what they do." "Tell me," Daniel urged. Trevor licked his lips. "They cut corners. Always have. Reused caskets, mixed up bodies, sometimes worse." Daniel felt bile rise in his throat. "What do you mean, worse?" Trevor swallowed hard. "Sometimes they damage the bodies, cover it up, switch 'em. They think no one will notice. And families like yours, they count on you not asking questions." Daniel gripped the table, his whole body shaking. "My daughter, was she—" Trevor looked away. "If there's dirt, bruises, yeah, they moved her. For what, I don't know, but it wasn't an accident." Sarah gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Will you go on record?" Emily asked. Trevor shook his head violently. "No, no way. They'll kill me." Daniel leaned in. "They've already threatened me, vandalized my car, but I'm not stopping." Trevor stared at him for a long moment. "I'll think about it." He left quickly, disappearing into the night. Daniel sat there, fists clenched, rage simmering just beneath the surface. "I knew it," he whispered. "I knew they were lying." Emily placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're not done yet. Not by a long shot. The following days passed in a haze of restless waiting and rising anger. Daniel felt like a man possessed, pacing through the house, eyes constantly glued to his phone, waiting for a call that might never come. Sarah tried to keep him grounded, but it was no use. Everything felt wrong. The world had shifted, and now he was walking through a nightmare with no end in sight. Trevor hadn't called back. Emily reached out twice. Nothing. Daniel could feel him slipping away, the only person willing to speak the truth. And if Trevor vanished, so would their one real chance of proving what had been done to Maya. "I should have pushed him harder," Daniel muttered one night, staring at his laptop, the damning video paused on the frame where the shadow flickered. "You did what you could," Sarah said softly, sitting beside him. "He's scared. We all are." Daniel shook his head. "I don't have the luxury of being scared. Maya deserves better." Emily called the next morning. Her voice was grim. "I tracked down more complaints. Same story. Black families, ignored reports, missing jewelry, mishandled bodies. But none of it stuck. Not enough proof." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we give them proof." Emily hesitated. "I'm going to publish the first article, Daniel. We can't wait for Trevor forever. The community needs to know." Daniel's heart pounded. "Will it be enough?" Emily sighed. "It's a start." The article went live 2 days later. The headline was simple but devastating. "Local funeral home accused of gross negligence and cover-up in child's death." Emily detailed everything. Maya's suspicious bruises, the dirt, the video footage, the funeral home's history, the connections to the hospital. She left out Trevor's name but made it clear there was a former employee confirming the worst of it. The story spread like wildfire. Within hours, Daniel's phone blew up. Calls, texts, emails. Some were supportive, offering prayers and condolences. Others were threats. "Drop it or you'll regret it," one voicemail hissed. "Stop digging," another message spray-painted across Daniel's garage door, read in bold red letters. Sarah stared at the words, horror written across her face. "Daniel, you have to stop. This is getting dangerous." Daniel shook his head. "No, this means they're scared. We keep going." The pressure worked. 3 days later, Trevor called. "They came to my house," he whispered, his voice shaking, "smashed my windows, said if I talked I'd end up like the others." Daniel's stomach dropped. "There are others?" Trevor didn't answer. "Trevor, please, testify. Go on record. You're the only one who can blow this open." A long silence followed. Then finally, "I'll do it. But you have to help me. I need protection." Daniel promised whatever it took. Emily arranged a meeting with an attorney, someone experienced in whistleblower cases. Trevor agreed to meet them the next day. Meanwhile, the article forced the police to act. Under public pressure, the department announced they were reopening the investigation into Maya's death and the funeral home's practices. Daniel stood in front of the TV watching the press conference. The police chief looked uncomfortable, reading from a prepared statement. "We take these allegations seriously and will conduct a thorough investigation." Sarah scoffed. "They don't mean it." "I know," Daniel replied, "but it doesn't matter. The media forced their hand." The same night, Emily called again. "It's bigger than we thought. The funeral home is part of a network. Money, bodies, referrals from hospitals. It's all connected." Daniel's mind reeled. How the hell did no one see this? "Because no one cared," Emily said bitterly. "Until now." Trevor showed up the next day looking like a ghost, eyes hollow, skin pale. The attorney, Angela Reed, greeted him carefully. "You understand what's at stake?" she asked. Trevor nodded. "Yeah, but I can't live like this. I have to say something." They recorded his statement, every word. "They told us not to worry about families like his," Trevor said, his voice trembling. "Said no one would check, no one would care. We cut corners, reused caskets, screwed up the embalming. Sometimes we had to move the bodies around, cover our mistakes." Daniel listened, his fist clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. "Why, Maya?" Angela asked softly. Trevor shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe they thought it was safe. Another black kid, another accident, but something went wrong. I think they hurt her. After." Sarah gasped. Daniel couldn't speak. Angela finished the statement, then looked Trevor dead in the eye. "You need protection. I'll make some calls." Trevor nodded. "Just don't let them bury this." The words echoed in Daniel's head. Don't let them bury this. Emily promised the next article would hit harder, with Trevor's testimony, anonymous for now, but powerful. Daniel drove home in silence, Sarah beside him. The weight in the car was unbearable. "You did it," Sarah whispered. "You made someone talk." "It's not enough," Daniel replied. "Not yet." The next morning, Daniel found his car vandalized again. Windows shattered, tires slashed, a note on the windshield, "This is your last warning." He stood there, breathing heavily, rage burning through him. Sarah rushed out, her face pale. "You have to call the police," she said. "I'm done calling them," Daniel growled. "We finish this ourselves." He called Emily. "Print it. Everything. Trevor's story, the threats, the whole damn truth." Emily hesitated. "Daniel, if I run this, there's no going back." "I know," he said. "Do it." That night, Daniel sat by Maya's drawing, the one she made that last morning. The father and daughter standing under the tree, smiling. "I won't stop, baby," he whispered. "I swear to you, I won't stop." The days that followed were a blur of chaos, fear, and stubborn determination. Emily's second article dropped like a bomb on the community. This time, she held nothing back. Trevor's testimony, anonymous but detailed, was front and center. She laid out the funeral home's crimes, the history of abuse, the systematic targeting of black families, and the threats Daniel had received. The response was immediate. Protests erupted outside the funeral home. Dozens of people gathered, holding signs that read "Justice for Maya" and "No more neglect." Local news stations picked up the story, and soon the headlines spread across the state. The funeral home shut its doors, but it was too late. The world was watching now. Daniel stood among the crowd, Sarah by his side. He watched as people he'd never met shouted for justice, their voices rising together. For the first time since Maya's death, he didn't feel completely alone. "They're scared," Sarah whispered. "Look at them. They're finally scared." Daniel nodded, but the ache in his chest didn't fade. "It won't bring her back." "No," Sarah agreed. "But it might stop them from doing this to someone else." The police, facing intense media pressure, announced that formal charges were being considered. An investigation was officially opened, not just into the funeral home, but into the network Emily uncovered. Corruption, money laundering, malpractice, all of it. Daniel felt a flicker of hope. but it was fragile, and it didn't last long. That night, Daniel received a call that sent a chill down his spine. It was Trevor. "They know I talked," Trevor whispered, his voice trembling. "They're coming after me." Daniel's heart pounded. "Where are you?" "I left town. I'm at my cousin's. But they found me once. They'll find me again." Daniel glanced at Sarah, who listened intently, fear flashing in her eyes. "I need protection," Trevor continued. "I can't do this alone." "I'll talk to Angela," Daniel promised. "We'll figure something out." After the call, Daniel sat in silence, staring at the wall. The walls felt like they were closing in. "They're trying to scare him into running." Sarah nodded. "It's working." Emily showed up the next morning, face pale, eyes tired. "They're serious about shutting us up," she said. "My editor's getting calls, anonymous threats. They even followed me home last night." Daniel clenched his fists. "We don't stop. We can't." Emily nodded. "I'm setting up an interview. Live. You, me, Angela. We're putting this on camera. They can't silence us if the whole world is watching." Daniel hesitated, but then nodded. "Do it." The interview was scheduled for the following evening at the local news station. Emily pulled every string she had to make it happen. It wasn't just about Maya anymore. It was about every family that had been wronged. The night before the interview, Daniel barely slept. He sat in Maya's room, staring at her drawings, her toys, her empty bed. The pain was unbearable, but the anger kept him moving. He couldn't fail her. Not now. At the station, the tension was thick. Cameras, lights, microphones. Daniel felt exposed, vulnerable. Angela sat beside him, calm and composed. Emily stood ready, her notes in hand. When the broadcast began, Daniel took a deep breath and told Maya's story. Every word felt like tearing open a fresh wound, but he pushed through. He spoke of the bruises, the dirt, the voices on the tape. He spoke of the funeral home's cruelty, the police indifference, and the threats that followed. Angela followed, laying out the legal side, the evidence, the mountain of complaints that had been ignored. Then Emily dropped the bombshell. "We have reason to believe that this funeral home was part of a larger operation, profiting off the bodies of black families, swapping caskets, cutting corners, lying to grieving parents because they thought no one would notice, no one would care." The broadcast ended in silence. Daniel stared at the camera, his voice steady but his heart breaking. "My daughter's name was Maya Harris. She was 10 years old, and she deserved better." The interview went viral. Within hours, national media picked up the story. Hashtags flooded social media. #Justice for Maya, #Funeral Home Scandal, #Protect Black Families. But the attention came with a price. The next morning, Daniel woke to find his front yard trashed. Trash thrown everywhere, windows cracked. Another message painted in red across his door. "You should have stayed quiet." Sarah burst into tears. "Daniel, we have to stop. They won't stop." Daniel stood firm. "I don't care what they do to me. I'm seeing this through." Emily called later that day. "They're cornered now. The DA's office called me. They're preparing charges, but they want Trevor to testify in person." Daniel's stomach dropped. "He's terrified." "I know, but without him it might not be enough." Daniel sat in silence, then finally nodded. "I'll talk to him." Trevor was a wreck when Daniel called. "They'll kill me," he whispered. "You saw what's happening," Daniel pleaded. "People are listening now. You can end this." "I don't know if I'm strong enough," Trevor said. "You are," Daniel replied. "Maya needs you to be." There was a long pause. Then, finally, "Okay, I'll do it." Daniel hung up, relief flooding through him. Sarah hugged him tightly. "We're so close." But Daniel knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The real fight was still coming. The courthouse loomed large as Daniel pulled into the parking lot the morning of the hearing. Everything they'd fought for came down to this moment. The sky was gray, the air heavy with the promise of rain, and the streets outside were lined with protesters holding signs that read "Justice for Maya" and "No more cover-ups." Cameras flashed as Daniel stepped out of the car, Sarah close beside him. Reporters shouted questions, but he ignored them all. Angela was waiting near the entrance. She looked sharp, confident, but Daniel saw the tension in her jaw. "You ready?" she asked. "No," Daniel admitted, "but I'm here." Inside, the courtroom was packed. On one side sat the funeral home's team, sleek lawyers in expensive suits, their faces stone cold. Richard Brooks sat among them, staring straight ahead as if none of it mattered. Across the aisle, Daniel sat with Angela and Sarah. Emily was nearby with her camera crew, ready to document every second. Daniel scanned the room until his eyes landed on Trevor. He looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped, but he gave Daniel a small nod. He was here. That was all that mattered. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Opening statements were brutal. The funeral home's lawyers wasted no time attacking Daniel's credibility. They called him unstable, grief-stricken, and paranoid. They argued the video footage was inadmissible, distorted, and unreliable. The voices, just static. Shadows, a trick of light. Daniel clenched his fists but said nothing. Then Angela stood, calm, precise. She laid out the facts, the bruises, the dirt, the funeral home's record of complaints. She played the audio in court, letting the words, "Just get it done, they'll never check," echo through the room. The jurors shifted uncomfortably, some glancing toward the defense table. Trevor took the stand next. At first, his voice trembled, his eyes darting around the room like he expected someone to lunge at him. But as he spoke, something changed. His shoulders straightened. His voice grew stronger. "They told us to cut corners," Trevor said. "They told us it didn't matter, especially with black families. Said they wouldn't fight back." Gasps rippled through the room. Trevor looked directly at Richard Brooks. "We reused caskets, mixed up bodies, and when mistakes happened, we covered them up because we thought no one would ever care." Angela nodded, guiding him gently. "And Maya?" Trevor swallowed hard. "They moved her. After. I don't know why. Maybe they damaged her. Maybe worse. But they moved her. That's why there was dirt. That's why there were bruises." Daniel couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like a weight crushing his chest. The defense tried to destroy Trevor. They called him a liar, a disgruntled former employee with a grudge. But Trevor held his ground. "I kept quiet for years," he said. "Not anymore." The judge called for closing statements. The funeral home's lawyers doubled down, painting Daniel as a desperate father seeing ghosts where there were none. But Angela finished strong. "This isn't just about one little girl," she told the jury. "It's about a system that thought it could get away with treating some families like they mattered less. It's about a little girl named Maya Harris who deserved dignity, even in death." The jury was sent to deliberate. Daniel sat motionless, staring at the floor. Sarah squeezed his hand. "No matter what happens, you fought." "I'm not ready to lose her again," Daniel whispered. Hours passed. The courthouse lights dimmed. Finally, the jury returned. Daniel stood, heart hammering against his ribs as the forewoman rose. "On the charges of gross negligence, abuse of a corpse, and fraud, we find the defendants guilty." A gasp swept through the room. Daniel exhaled sharply, his knees nearly buckling. Richard Brooks sat frozen, his mouth slightly open in shock. The lawyers beside him scrambled, already whispering about appeals. The judge's voice rang out. "Sentencing will follow, but let the record show. This court recognizes the dignity and value of every family, of every child." Tears streamed down Daniel's face. Sarah hugged him tightly, sobbing into his shoulder. Emily captured the moment, her camera shaken as she struggled to hold back her own emotions. Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers as the news spread. Angela turned to Daniel. "We did it." "No," Daniel whispered. "Maya did it." Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, but Daniel ignored them all. He looked up at the sky, his chest rising with the deepest breath he'd taken in months. Justice. It wasn't enough. It would never bring Maya back, but it was something, and it was hers. The verdict echoed through Daniel's mind long after the courthouse doors closed behind him. Guilty. They said it. They couldn't take it back. Yet as Daniel stood in the cold evening air, the word didn't bring the peace he thought it might. Nothing could. Not really. Sarah stayed close, silent, her hand gripping his arm like she was afraid he'd drift away. Emily walked ahead, phone pressed to her ear, already feeding the story to the newsroom. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, but Daniel ignored it all. Only one thing mattered now: Maya. The funeral home director and several staff members were facing charges. The court ordered them to pay damages. But none of it brought Maya back. No amount of money or justice could erase the image of her tiny coffin or the sound of her laughter that haunted Daniel's dreams. A week passed before Daniel returned to the cemetery. The sky was gray, the wind sharp as he stood over Maya's grave. Her name carved in stone, beautiful and final. He knelt, fingers brushing over the cold letters. "I did it, baby," he whispered. "I made them see you." Tears stung his eyes, but this time they weren't just tears of grief, they were of pride. He stayed there for a long time, speaking softly, telling her everything. How people had come, strangers had marched, shouted her name, demanded justice. How Trevor had stood up. How Emily had fought like hell to tell the world her story. When he finally stood, Sarah was there waiting. She gave him a sad smile and slipped her hand into his. "They can't hurt anyone else now," she said quietly. Daniel nodded, but the ache in his chest remained. Some wounds never healed. In the weeks that followed, life moved forward, slowly and painfully. The funeral home shut down. Investigations into other funeral services began. The community kept talking. Maya's story didn't fade. It sparked something. Daniel, with Sarah and Emily's help, founded the Maya Harris Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting families like theirs. They fought against discrimination and negligence in healthcare and funeral services. They provided legal support, education, and, most importantly, a voice for those too often ignored. Emily kept covering the story, following every court date, every new investigation. The threats stopped, but Daniel knew better than to believe the fight was truly over. There would always be another battle, another family, another Maya. Still, the foundation grew. Donations poured in. People shared their own stories, some shockingly similar, stories that had been buried until now. One afternoon, while cleaning Maya's room, Daniel found her unfinished drawing, the one she had made that morning before everything fell apart. The father and daughter standing under a tree, hand in hand, smiling. The words she had written beneath it stopped him cold. "Always together, Dad." Daniel stared at the drawing for a long time, tears streaming down his face. Then, carefully, he framed it and hung it in the living room where everyone could see. Not as a reminder of death, but of love. Of the bond that couldn't be broken. The seasons changed, the protests faded, but Daniel stayed busy, visiting schools, speaking at events, doing whatever he could to make sure Maya's name meant something. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned gold, Daniel stood outside his house, watching the breeze sway the trees. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. Maya was gone, but her memory lived. In every family they helped, in every life they changed, in every injustice they refused to let stand. As Daniel stood there, he smiled. A real smile, small but full of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The fight wasn't over. It might never be. But Daniel Harris was ready. For Maya, always. What would you do if you were in his place? Share your thoughts in the comments while we read every single one. And tell us where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see viewers from around the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon for more stories that touch your heart.